It's showtime.
Okay, Tokyo, South America, Australia, France, Germany, UK, Africa.
Here we go. Head On with Bob Kincaid. 3 hours of conversation, cussing, and a discussin' with America's only born and bred Southern liberal talk host. Head On with Bob Kincaid is brought to you each night by Coal River Mountain Watch. Coal River Mountain Watch invites you to become part of the solution, part of a sustainable future, part of the uprising against mountaintop removal. Coal River Mountain Watch, crmw.net. And now, from high in the hills of beautiful West Bicod, Virginia, here's Bob Kincaid on the Head On Radio Network.
Well, howdy. And here we go, off and running for this 19th day of March, 2019. We are 1 day away from the vernal equinox, otherwise known as the first glorious day of spring. Hi, I'm Bob Kincaid. This is The Horn. HeadOn.live is where you'll find us each and every evening, and the rest of the time, too, online. And that's where you'll also find a link to the chat room. Just click on it, pick out a screen name and a password, and during the 3 hours in which this program is live, Monday through Friday, 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 3 to 6 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, well, you'll find the merry band gathered therein. If you do pick out the aforesaid screen name and password, you will this evening be immediately greeted by the likes of Anatole and Dowhead and Sentient Being and Squeaky, and who else? Yes, and Otto DeShot. You will, and you will also be capably moderated by longtime inveterate, indefatigable veteran chat room moderator Sparky, who, being a spacing guild master, has folded space to become man cave. It's space folding season in Northern California. You'll also be capably moderated by pinch hit midweek utility chat room moderator and all-around great guy, Steve from Georgistan. Hot diggity. It looks like it's going to be a great evening in the chat room for this little 3 hour gathering, this 3 hour conversation. Indeed, indeed, indeed. We have thanks to give out, as we do at the beginning of almost every program. Thanks to our subscribers this evening. Our subscribers on the 19th day of each month are our buddy Mike in Cascadia, our pal Joseph. Thank you, Joseph. Thanks as well to David, and thanks very much indeed to Sharon, and thanks to Dave from Talibandiana. Thanks each and every one of you for your partial sponsorship of the program, and to all of our subscribers who knock down about a week's worth out of every month's funding needs here for this little independent adventure in liberal progressive broadcasting. Thank you very kindly indeed, one and all. Let's see, what have we got? Let's just get this number out there because it's nice and terrifying. The fundraising goal for the evening is $660. Youch. But there's good news. Instead of 66 people at $10 or 10 people at $66, I had a note from John earlier today, and John said, hey, I'm going to put a $150 challenge on the table. And that means that if it can be met, he said, if that's met, I will then kick in another $50. Sounds pretty nice, huh? Good deal. Double your money. So there it is. There's $150 in challenge money on the table. And if we can get 15 people at $10 or 10 people at $15 or some combination thereof, well, by Jove, we will knock out Carry the 12. We'll knock out. We'll knock the fundraising goal down to $310, and that'll be a lot less terrifying than going into Thorn in the Side Thursday with a fundraising goal of $860. Sorry, I don't mean to make ugly noises in the microphone, but that's a little breathtaking. So let's see if in the first hour of the program we can inspire John. We can live up to John's confidence and come up with $150 so that we'll get it down to $310 and worry about the rest later. So a $150 challenge on the table, courtesy of John. Courtesy of John. Okay. Let me just check real quick. I want to make sure I've got the numbers right. Yep, $150 challenge. If it's met tonight, not overnight, if it's met tonight during the program, John adds another $50. So that's that's $350 out of $660, leaves $310 remaining. Thank you very kindly, John. Thank you very, very much indeed. And hopefully we will knock that down in short order. And hey, that's inspiring. Ralph's just got us started. Ralph's up in Wisconsin, formerly the Trash Fitzwalker Stand Challenge of 2018, and that means we've only got $140 to go to finish off John's, what do we call it, Trumptanic Tuesday Challenge? Because, I mean, it is. So there's $150 remaining. Thank you very kindly, Ralphs, for getting things going. Hopefully you'll have a lot of company along the way, and we'll knock that out quickly. Oh, a program note, reminder, please. There will be no program tomorrow evening. As I mentioned before, Agnes has her first appointment with the rheumatology, not a doctor, up in Morgantown. And Morgantown's a 320-mile round trip, so we'll go up tomorrow, and then we'll have the appointment tomorrow morning, and then hit the road and come back here and be ready to roll for Thorn in the Side Thursday. Okay, so again, no program tomorrow. And secondly, another reminder, just I don't, because everybody I guess doesn't listen to every podcast, or every live program. I will be gone in the month of April doing Appalachian Community Health Emergency Campaign work. I'll be gone from Monday the 1st through Wednesday the 10th. I hope to be home in time to do the program on Wednesday the 10th, but that's 7 days of programming at the beginning of April, and it is utterly, there's nothing frivolous about it. I explained last night what's at stake here, and it's literally history making. And along the way, I will try to do some broadcasts, although it's absolutely impossible that I'll be able to do a broadcast every night. But I'll tweet and I'll Facebook and what have you on the evenings when I'm going to be live. Okay? Thank you. Our buddy Suman says we'll be knocking it down to 140 to go. No, I'm sorry, 130 to go on John's Trumptanic Tuesday Challenge in short order. Thank you, Suman. Thank you very kindly. And, it remains at the forefront of my mind that warmer weather, it's on the way. It's on the way. Not quite here yet. We're going to be kind of brisk for the next few nights, but with the first day of spring tomorrow coming, it's not going to be very, very long at all until I'm able to frolic in the yard and get out among other things, get out the propane-fueled outdoor stove and make the chicken or the curry fall. That's supposed to be the hottest curry on earth, and again, we're going to coordinate with Suman and John Brideveau and Brother Deacon Asa and anybody else that wants to jump in, and we're all going to make it together, and we are going to simultaneously sweat and suffer and revel and have the endorphin rush that comes with having, with eating something that is supposedly mind-bendingly hot. Yay. Yummy. So I'd say that'll be coming after I get back from D.C. And here's hoping there's no early spring storms or anything, and I don't have to drive in, a blizzard or anything on the way back. It has happened before, but hopefully climate change won't screw us over, and I'll be able to just toddle on home. I remember the blizzard of a few years back. Took 2 days to get home from D.C. Sheesh. All right, so that leaves us pretty much ready to dive into the madness that is Trumptanic Tuesday. Yes, Julius Geezer is at the helm of the SS Trumptanic. The iceberg, the part you can see, is dead ahead. The part you can't is even closer. And the captain has screamed, "On ahead full, flank speed, will show that iceberg what it means to put America first and make the Trumptanic great again." Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. That's only modestly terrifying. Oh, and thank you very kindly. I was... Let's see. What was it again? Oh, thank you to Kat in Ohio as well. I hadn't seen that, so that takes the fundraising goal down to $640, which means we're down now to we've still got 130 to go on the goal. But thank you, Kat, and thank you for being such a huge part of the equipment fundraiser as well. Thank you very kindly indeed. What's that? Scott in San Diego. Spring. I, too, am delighted by the arrival of spring. I can almost feel my sap rising as I type this. It is too early to get this program into the gutter, Scott. Should nothing adverse occur tonight, this will mark the first time in years that I did not have a winter cold. Winning. Then again, how do you, not to be a jerk or anything, how can you tell when it's spring in San Diego? I mean, really. Although I do remember Scott pointing out that the locals were shivering down in the 40s at one point. So it's all a matter of what you get used to, I guess. Yeah. Trumptanic Tuesday. It's a Lulu, to say the very least. And the where to start part is, well, after the conversation yesterday evening about potential remedies to the madness of the Emperor Orange Julius. Well, it was kind of a matter of wondering what the day itself would bring. But then again, that's a place where I've been since, oh God Almighty, January the 20th, 2017. every day has been an adventure in are we fucked yet? And we get just a little more fucked every day. But some days are better than others. I guess we could call this the I can't believe it's not racism edition of this Trumptanic Tuesday. And yeah, I was doing what I do in the morning. I've been to Charleston and back today. I had to run an errand. But I got up and got after it early this morning. But while I was sitting there having my morning decaf, I saw the funniest thing I have quite possibly ever seen in terms of the content of my filthy little habit in the morning. I saw and heard, I should say. I don't know what possesses people to book the guests that they book, but this was truly one for the ages, because I guess at the behest of, because the guy, well, Joe invited me here. A former member of the House of Representatives from Talibandiana, and the guy who ran for governor of Talibandiana in 2000. Well, you know how wingnut welfare works. When you get done being a wingnut in Congress, there's somebody waiting there for you to give you a wingnut welfare job so you never have to work for a living ever again. And in this case, it had to do with this guy, David McIntosh, who left politics, sure he did, and got himself a wingnut welfare job heading up a wingnut organization at one of these places where you go when there's nowhere that would actually pay you for honest work. And you get to sit around thinking big conservative thoughts. In this case, the Club for Growth. It sounds like a fraternity for people who have tumors or something. Yeah, I just joined up with the Club for Growths because I got one down there on my. Yeah, I don't want to tell you where it is. It's kind of embarrassing, but. Yeah, I'm a member of the Club for Growths now. And they worry about fiscal responsibility. And they worry about conservative economic policies. When at the end of the day, all they're concerned about is making sure that their hogs are the ones that get both their front and back trotters into the trough so that there's nothing for anybody else. And in this particular instance, the reason that David McIntosh, former congressman, former Talibandiana gubernatorial candidate, current recipient of wingnut welfare, the reason he was invited on is, well, golly Moses, the Club for Growths. If you take a course of antibiotics, you can get rid of that growth there. Never mind. They've produced what is arguably the first big smear ad of this presidential season. Of course, there's nobody running against Julius Geezer, at least not yet. So that means that the Club for Growths, oh no, really, we spray a little bit of liquid nitrogen on that thing, and a couple of days from now, it'll fall right off. Does that mean I won't be able to be in the Club for Growths anymore? No, no. Once you're in the Club for Growths, we're always waiting for the next growth. You see how it works. The Club for Growths never closes. It's kind of like Krispy Kreme donuts that way. Oh, Jesus. And well, let's make it 7-Elevens. I don't want to ruin Krispy Kreme for anybody. But, you know, they never close. And, right, just the same thing with the Club for Growth. As long as anybody out there is getting Social Security, as long as anybody out there has anything resembling a decent wage who isn't a recipient of wingnut welfare, the Club for Growths and David McIntosh will be there to piss and moan about it. So they took some of their 501c3 tax-exempt money, or maybe they're a 501c4, and they decided to use it to attack, wait for it, Beto O'Rourke. Now, this is not surprising because while this is the first smear ad, it is not the first smear. No, that happened on St. Patrick's Day when @GOP sent out an anti-Irish smear with a black and white photo because, see, that whole "for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God" business, well, you know, that's for Republicans, not for Democrats. And in his youth, well, you know, just like George W. Bush, but IOKIYAR, Beto O'Rourke had a DUI. Yes, he did. And unlike, say, Club for Growth friend Matt Getz of Florida, he didn't weasel out of it. Now, Matt Getz in Florida has been pulled over for DUI more times than Carter has little liver pills, but his daddy always makes them go away. This is not the case with Beto O'Rourke. Beto O'Rourke had a DUI, and on St. Patrick's Day, @GOP on Twitter posted his mugshot with a green shamrock festooned hat that said a St. Patrick's Day message from Robert Francis O'Rourke. Always drink responsibly. No, really. The Republicans on Twitter put out a tired, worn-out, sickening, and arguably ethnic smear, playing on the old trope that Irish people are helpless to keep themselves from becoming constantly intoxicated. I mean, my God, that's only been around, since the English invaded Ireland. And it was picked up and run with here. It ran hand in hand with the ancient smear that included bias and bigotry that led to things like signs in communities that said, "No Irish need apply," and had editorial cartoons that depicted Irish people as apes and sluggards and layabouts and lazy no-goods and everything that the Republicans would go on to use to depict African Americans later. Because you can't be a Republican if you don't have somebody to hate. It's the essence of Republicanism. So that's how @GOP celebrated. No kidding. St. Patrick's Day. I wish I was kidding. Unfortunately, I'm not. But that was the first smear. The second smear, getting back to the original topic. Oh, well, true. Flavio with a note. Club for Growth for bald men like me? Where do I join? Don't. If you join the Club for Growth, Flavio, the only place hair will grow will be on your palms. Maybe the soles of your feet. I don't know. Yeah. Creepy Club for Growth. But no, they produced a smear ad. The Club for Growth did. Mm-hmm. And they aimed it squarely at Beto O'Rourke, and they invited David McIntosh onto that program, My Filthy Morning Habit, to talk about it.
Obama went on to become the first African-American editor of the Harvard Law Review, breaking barriers. Beto crashed into them, causing a collision while driving drunk, then fleeing the scene to avoid accountability. His charges were dropped as people of color languished behind bars for far less.
Okay, so they didn't exactly suffer all the consequences, but some of the charges were dropped. But you couldn't very well say that he fled the scene if it was a completely consequenceless event. Interestingly, no mention in this ad of, say, the God only knows how many times that very same scenario, again, has happened with one of the biggest maggots in the House of Representatives, Matt Gaetz. But you knew it was going to be funny because, again, this was a bunch of Republicans who spent 8 years shrieking about that Kenyan Muslim usurper in our White House. He's going to spend us into the poorhouse. He's spending money like a drunken sailor, and he's going to bankrupt us all with that there Kenyan Muslim usurper Obamacare. Yeah, there were no pro-Obama ads run during the tenure of Barack Obama. No, not at all, ever. But according to this, they were big. Obama broke barriers as you heard it. While Beto O'Rourke smashed through them. Hypocrite much, Club for Growth? Oh, yes, abso-damn-lutely, but it only gets better.
Youthful indiscretions or threads in a lifelong pattern revealing an indelible sense of entitlement.
Wow. That was a clip from a new ad from the conservative group Club for Growth as it takes on Beto O'Rourke. Let's bring it right now. Former congressman from Indiana, currently the president of Club for Growth, David McIntosh. We go way back. Also with us, managing editor of The Beat, Tiffany.
And just by way of explanation, David McIntosh, there must be something in the water in Talibandiana that makes people makes cranky old Republican men grow helmet hair. Yeah, the phrase first appeared on this program by way of helmet-headed proud son of Stanford, Brian Fisher of the American Family Association of Tupelo, Muzlipistan. I don't know that he's from Talibandiana, but Mike Pence and David McIntosh have absolutely identical race-banning helmet hair from Johnny Quest. I don't know how much time it takes them. Maybe they just spray their heads down with mousse or fop, or because I don't think either one of those guys are Dapper Dan men. and then they just put the helmet mold down over their head. I don't know. But somehow or another, that's what you wind up with. So we've got the introduction of who's going to be talking this morning.
Cross. So, David, I got to ask you, were you as critical as I was at the end of the 2000 campaign when somebody dug up George W. Bush's DUI arrest?
I was actually quiet about that. I think I was recovering from running for governor at the time.
This is certainly starting out kind of. I thought. I mean, we were congressmen together, Joe. We were part of the band of Newt Gingrich brothers, Joe. Why are you asking me about George Bush being a drunk who drove his car through the family's plate glass window? Why? Yeah, Ron in Raleigh with a note. Bob, did I hear you correctly? Did you say Club for Grift? For BBT, Bib Barbecue Todd, and Steve from Georgia Stan, today is the anniversary of the first day of broadcasting for C-SPAN. On a sadder note, Dick Dale, king of the surf guitar, passed away yesterday at 81. I noticed that. Our buddy Reverbo, the human boy, went into day-long mourning at that. Last week, one of the truly big men of wrestling, King Kong Bundy, went on to the squared circle in the great beyond. And yet somehow, Ron, the Club for Grift continues. Oh, that explains the helmet hair. Jason with a note, Jason out in California. Hair made out of Play-Doh. Trademark. Okay. I can work with that. It makes more sense than I wish it did. I was recovering from running for governor. No, I don't think so. You were you ran in 2000, David McIntosh. You were still running in 2000. And I'm sure you were shocked, I tell you, shocked to find out that George W. Bush was engaging in youthful indiscretions, because the business with the plate glass window happened up in his 40s.
But, the key message here, Joe, is that Beto O'Rourke is not what he's portraying himself to be. He's not a man of the people. He's really a guy who's out for himself, and the ad shows that.
Does it now? Oh, begorra, you say. No, maybe I better leave the Irish accents alone. Man who's out for himself, you say, do you? To the tune of dummying up his finances and trying to get Deutsche Bank to lie for him because he had a lifelong dream to own an NFL franchise going way back to when he was refused on his attempt to own one by the NFL back in the 80s or 90s. That kind of self-serving, in it for himself stuff. Oh, wait, that would be Donald Trump.
You mean like Donald Trump?
Ooh, see what I did there?
I don't want to comment about Donald Trump. What we're saying in this ad...
No, I don't want to comment about Donald Trump. I'm here to talk about Beto O'Rourke because, well, at the mere mention of his name, I fill my shorts with dread because he's young, he's telegenic, he's popular, and he could probably, no probably about it, he could destroy Donald Trump on a debate stage with one hand tied behind it, with half his brain tied behind his back, like one of my heroes, Flush Flembaugh, says when I'm listening to him on the radio, says David McIntosh.
You've got a guy who's very charismatic, and we have to take him seriously because we saw what he did in Texas. We were supporting Ted Cruz, and he came out of nowhere. But his background is white privilege, and when he served on the city council there, his main project was to demolish a poor Hispanic neighborhood and use eminent domain to turn it over to his father-in-law.
David McIntosh, did you just use the term white privilege?
Yeah, you know, when Joe Scarborough laughs at a brother Republican for using the term white privilege, you know things are pretty well gone off the rails already. But he did. He did. He accused this guy with the Play-Doh helmet hair, who has never lived a day in his life without being absolutely dipped by the heel in his white, and oh, I do mean white privilege, is suddenly concerned with white privilege. Yes. I got to thinking about it, and I had to go back and research the hysterical record, and there he was. There he was in Ferguson, Missouri. There he was in New York. There he was in Dallas and Baton Rouge. That strange, out of place white man with the helmet hair holding the banner that said Black Lives Matter. No, that was not him, because he's never been there. He doesn't give a good almighty damn about African American lives. But now, all of a sudden, because Beto O'Rourke makes him have the night terrors, well, white privilege is an issue.
I'm just curious. Did you just say white privilege?
You know, the interesting thing about that, Joe, is after we ran that ad, Beto has actually embraced that and was explaining to people in Iowa he does have white privilege, and that's why he's running for president, so he can help them overcome that. Overcome. Yeah, I'm sure he knows all the words to "We Shall Overcome," too, David McIntosh of the Club for Grift, Club for Growth. Mm-hmm. Why, yes, as a matter of fact, it was. Ron and Raleigh asking, why, was that old cousin Seamus Kincaid I just heard? Why, it was. It was. Whether you may not realize this, but Ron and Raleigh is the official Kincaid genealogist. He knows every branch of the old Kincaid family, even going back to the old sod. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. No, this is high comedy. If this had been a Monty Python skit, it couldn't have been any better. White privilege. And the best part of it was, you know, usually Mike Barnacle can be counted on to provide some sort of straight man commentary to the goofiness that is Joe Scarborough. Like I said, I watched this program for the humor value. And, however, they pitched the question to one of their guest commentators and then to Barnacle. And honest to God, I thought Barnacle was going to go across the table. Why, I oughta...
Donald Trump in the House, but I will move on to the Democratic field. I think Beto enjoyed a lot of generous coverage from the media. I think a lot of people did look at that and compare it to the amount of coverage that women received and people of color in this race received, and there was something disproportionate about that, and so that has helped drive some of his popularity. I do find it, though, interesting that when Beto was in Iowa, I don't think this ad prompted him, because he's been talking about white privilege for a long time. I do want to, I think it was interesting, and I applaud him for calling out his own privilege in a room full of people in Iowa, which is...
I might note that the woman speaking is an African-American woman, as compared to, say, this David McIntosh guy, who does that trick, and I've never been able to do it very well at all, or you talk with your teeth clenched and your lips hardly move. I mean, the guy's got a real future as a ventriloquist if he ever decides to go there.
90% white, and calling out some of the privileges that he's enjoyed. But when he ran for Senate against Ted Cruz, he spoke very openly about the police brutality issues, which I think resonated with a lot of voters, not just voters of color, but all voters.
Dave, given the...
Did you notice that, Dave? Because Barnacle is about to have a hernia, or in his case, a hymnia.
Some of the privileges that he's enjoyed. But when he ran for Senate against Ted Cruz, he spoke very openly about the police brutality issues, which I think resonated with a lot of voters, not just voters of color, but all voters.
Dave, given the level of discourse in American politics, the level of lying, manipulation, personal attacks, avoidance of history, lack of character in the President of the United States, how can you put out an ad like that and further take this system into the sewer?
Well, first of all, I don't think it takes the system into the sewer.
You don't?
Just watch. You're going to see ads that are much more in the sewer. This is about a guy.
Oh, what a defense. Oh, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this ad doesn't take the system into the sewer. Why, it's going to look positively non-sewer-like by the time, because there's a lot of other wingnut welfare organizations out there. They're gonna put a lot of stuff out that's a lot more filthy than anything that we've done here. So, let's not have any more of this sewer talk, Barnacle. My God, man. But poor Barnacle's usually, pretty straightforward, and he's not, no. But he was, I think he had been sucking in his breath and will not scream, because they don't like him to be the screamer. The only person who gets to scream on that set is Joe, and I think it's probably written in Barnacle's contract. Must not scream, only Joe screams. Dave.
President of the United States, how can you put out an ad like that and further take this system into the sewer?
Well, first of all, I don't think it takes the system into the sewer.
You don't?
Just watch. You're going to see ads that are much more in the sewer. This is about a guy who says, I'm for the people, but his whole record shows he's not. He's for himself. He was for his father-in-law.
You're talking Trump now.
No, I'm talking Beto O'Rourke.
Ooh, God, that had the sting going in. Talking Trump now. Mm-hmm. And there were actually two African Americans on the panel. The other was Dr. Eddie Glaude Jr. from Princeton, and it seemed to me that Eddie Glaude was just trying to everything in his power not to go, white man, please, because this guy, me, was sitting there. Helmet of hair, please. Oh. Yeah, by the way, we've got we're about 18 minutes left in this hour of the program, and just a note, there's a $150 challenge on the table, 130 of which remains to be met. If that's met, another 50 goes in. You more than double your contribution dollar, and we move boldly toward knocking down the rest of the fundraising hole that has plagued us since last week. We're more than halfway through the month of March. God Almighty!
Oh, yeah. Beto O'Rourke, face it. That's what he's about.
But
why don't you face
like Trump?
Why don't you face Beto O'Rourke?
Why don't you face
That's
the
what we're
President
talking about.
of the
That's
We are
United States,
facing
right?
Beto O'Rourke.
Because we're talking about Beto O'Rourke.
But here,
No, we're talking about you and the ad. That's what we're
That's maybe
talking
what
about.
you're talking about. Joe invited me here to talk about.
Yeah, God damn it! Joe invited me here. They didn't say there's going to be a lynch mob. I'm just surprised he didn't go lynch mob, but you take your victories where you can find them.
Beto O'Rourke.
Guys,
sorry,
one at a time, please.
No, I was just
Tiffany
gonna
first,
say-
then David.
Susan.
Or
okay.
is that Susan? I'm sorry, Susan.
That's
Go
right.
ahead.
So we pretty much can guess that the Club of Growth will endorse the Republican nominee if it's Donald Trump. It's pretty much out there. So we know the Club for Growth is not really reaching out to Democratic primary voters. The purpose of this ad is to take down somebody who I'm asking now, do you believe is the greatest threat to Donald Trump?
I think he's a very serious threat. I mean, we watched what he did in Texas in the race against Ted Cruz. He came out of nowhere. He's got charisma. You've got to give him that. What we're pointing out is what he's selling is not really the authentic person that he claims to be.
Well, in light of the fact of the current resident of the White House, that didn't seem to ever be a deal breaker for the Club for Growths before. But then again, they're not there. And see, this is a great example. This is a textbook example of everything that is wrong with our political system and the filthy, 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 filthy money that flows through it like a mighty sewer. The Club for Growth is supposed to be some sort kind of wonky pseudo-intellectual, because there aren't any conservative, right-wing, Republican intellectual organizations. They're all pseudo. But, they're about conservative economic policy. And lo and behold, it turns out that they're nothing but a chop shop for defending a guy. Remember Club for Growth? I mean, right? Economic growth? I mean, unless there's a parentheses after their name now and it's Club for Growth of White Supremacy and White Nationalism, in which case, well, okay, that would at least make a little bit of sense. But, yeah, because, see, there's the Trump tax giveaway is going to come home to roost in fairly short order. After the 8 years of the Club for Growth shrieking and howling about, Obama's spending money, Obama trillions of dollar deficit. And we're going to have the biggest budget deficit in the history of this nation, maybe ever combined, brought to you by Donald Trump. And that's not actually going to foster economic growth when the chickens come home to roost. No. But that doesn't matter. Because now, all they are is a cheering section for a guy with with 5 kids by 3 baby mamas, twice divorced, philandering, pays off porn stars, economic ripoff artist, grifter. I mean, if somebody did to the Club for Growth what Donald Trump has done to myriad lenders, well, A, the Club for Growth wouldn't exist. It would be bankrupt and gone. And B, if it was as long as it wasn't a Republican, they would be howling for justice and for somebody to be, by God, locked up. But then again, since it's Trump and right.
Political facts said that the claim about his father and father-in-law is mostly false. They've said that the claim about city council and the real estate issue is half true, right? So in some ways, you're trading in the very thing that we have been kind of awash in.
Eddie,
David, hold up, David. Let me just.
Sure.
What does it?
Yeah, don't interrupt the black guy, helmet head.
I want to echo something that Mike asked. What do you see as your responsibility for the current state of our democracy?
Well, the current over at the Club for Growth, Eddie, my responsibility is to let Donald J. Trump's withered, hairless balls rest on my chinny chin whenever he so chooses. Because, you see, my politics matter more than my country ever has or ever will. That would be the honest answer.
Right, because this seems to be just simply something that's deeply, deeply disturbing to me.
All right.
Our responsibility is to tell the truth, and I can tell you that ad is backed up by the facts. The record's there. Go look at the city council record. Beto O'Rourke fought over and over again to take away that neighborhood and turn it over to his father-in-law's development company. That's the facts. He can't avoid that.
But how is that in your... again, a reminder. And again, a reminder that, one, I have said time and again that if you listen to this program, you're going to be so far out in front of the curve, you're going to think you're on straight road. And this is another example of that. I've been pointing out that I'm not jumping on any bandwagons of any candidate because we're a rock-solid 9.5 months, 10 months away from the first primaries. And B, and this is the out in front of the curve part, I've said that however bad you thought that 2016 was in terms of sleazy, filthy politics, 2020 is going to make it seem like kindergarten daycare, because this political process is going to be utterly repulsive. And it's going to be stuff like this. And if we're going to give that helmet-headed freak any credit whatsoever, it's for what he said about, wow, yeah, what we did was sleazy and shameful. But by the time this thing really gets cooking, you ain't even seen sleazy and shameful. That much he gets credit for. But damned little else. David McIntosh and the Club for Growths are a big part of what the hell is wrong with our country. If the business about the city council and the eminent domain and so forth, if any of that is even a tenth true, why do the American people need the Club for Growth, which doesn't even have any Democrats in it, doesn't have a preferred candidate in the Democratic Party primary process, except to try to make sure that the weakest possible candidate faces off against Donald Trump? Why does anybody need the Club for Growth to run millions of dollars worth of ads on the topic? Where's their dog in the hunt? Well, the answer is there damned well isn't one. But I had a note from Scott in San Diego, going back to the voiceover that's in the smear ad produced by the Club for Growths.
Obama went on to become the first African-American editor of the Harvard Law Review. Breaking barriers. Beto crashed into them, causing a collision while driving drunk, then fleeing the scene to avoid accountability.
Speaking of accountability, one of the things I think that these ads should be required to disclose is who did the work. Because that wasn't somebody, that voiceover lady wasn't somebody donating her time and her talent to the production of that ad. She got paid, and probably paid well, by the Club for Growths. So why shouldn't, maybe in terms of political reform, we want these ads to run? Then, by God, let's know the name of the person who was willing to sell out their fucking integrity to produce the ad. Let's know her name. As Scott pointed out, that voice, I know nothing about the woman who voiced that anti-Beto ad, but can you imagine being a child of someone with that ominous voice and delivery? It'd be a pretty bleak upbringing, that's for sure. Every damn little thing being portrayed as some kind of nation-destroying catastrophe. Didn't eat their vegetables? The kids don't merely miss dessert. The woman just launches into her best Don LaFontaine in a world verbal fright fest description of the most severe consequences imaginable. You not only didn't eat your Brussels sprouts, son, you deprived an entire world of one serving of Brussels sprouts. What kind of person are you? Yeah, exactly. And since the guys from Talibandiana, I think our buddy Dave from Talibandiana should probably be heard from. Dave writing, my apologies for the hatred breeding ground of Talibandiana. Dave McIntosh has been a right-wing tool for so many decades, I think Jesus had his diapers changed by his grandpappy. As a recovering Catholic, I find their trope offensive. It reminds me of a previous conversation we've had on this program about blackface always being wrong. This kind of shit is wrong. The former Representative David I'm Not an Apple McIntosh. Oh, that's good. Wait. Oh, yeah. Is as bad as they come here. If orange is the new black, does not that make Donald Trump's makeup job blackface? Reporting from the island of sanity, otherwise known as Christine's house, your buddy Dave in the blind. Back to you, Dave. No, back to you, Bob. You know, Dave, I'd go out and change my name if just lest anybody mistake me for David McIntosh. Meanwhile, a note coming in from our buddy Steve in Vermont. There was an anthology of writings of social theorists in the early 60s that contributed to a book called The Radical Right. In this book, prominent social theorists like Daniel Bell and Theodore Adorno wrote about the creeping right-wing billionaire-funded extremism in the United States. Let's remember, for instance, that Pappy Coke, Dave and Chuck's daddy, was one of the initial funders of what? Yes, the John Birch Society, which later morphed into the Greater Republican Party and the Teabaggers and then, of course, the maggots. This was a time, Steve continues, a member of the fraternity of Steve, I might add. This was a time of fledgling right-wing think tanks like the Heritage Foundation that were created to undermine the civil rights movement and workers' rights. And this was the time of the emergence of such groups like the John Birch Society, as I mentioned, an organization of mostly Southern California billionaires and carbon extraction billionaires such as Texas oil man H.L. Hunt and the aforementioned Coke Pappy. The contributors to the radical right were mostly Jewish academics like Richard Hofstadter, who wrote the groundbreaking Paranoid Style in American Politics. If you've never read that 1964 book, you really should. You really owe it to yourself to read it, because even in 2019, it seems fresh as the morning dew. Who at the time of publication were reeling from the actual witch hunts of the left-wing intellectuals. This anthology was a way of consolidating their research and ideas and striking back at the sweeping generalizations and paranoia behind McCarthyism. This intellectual retrenchment led to many of the current notions we have of centrism today. The idea of centrism is interesting. If you're born rich or well off, it's doubtful you will become centrist in your thinking later in life if you've been conditioned to think that that which has been given to you has been earned. Maybe you double down being blessed by God for being rich. This is as much about privilege as it is about hard work. Poor people born without resources and influence are not concerned about privilege. Anyone who ends up voting for people who undermine their interests seem to be motivated by what could be called a notion of fairness built on a culture of political cynicism and plantation culture stereotypes. I worked for everything I have, and I'm not going to make it easier for anyone else, many a resentful voter has muttered to themselves as they enter the voting booth. They vote for politicians who will make life more difficult. Voting becomes an exercise of frustration in a political environment of negative expectations that have spiraled down into a toxic cynicism on the right. We see it today in the regression of white male belligerent outrage that is being manipulated by fascist propaganda. The externalization of these internal fears of displacement and a rigid white male-oriented social hierarchy is at the heart of fascism at work in the United States today. Trump says he can manipulate his base into violence. What, Steve asks, does centrism teach us about that? Well, centrism would say, first of all, that you mustn't call whatever this right-wing filth and hate is that flows like a mighty sewer through the United States today. You mustn't call that fascism, because only Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler and Generalissimo Francisco Franco, who is still dead, only they were fascists, no one else. And it's no fair, and it's downright unsporting to say that anyone else was a fascist, even if they are. By way of my poor attempt at an answer. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Steve. That was deeply thought-provoking. I appreciate emails like that. Meanwhile, our buddy Jimmy in the Great Northwest says, helmet hair, yes. How about Peter Graves' hair? You know what? He may be the patron saint of helmet hair. But I don't know. Do you think that Race Bannon was drawn with Peter Graves in mind? Was Peter Graves a right-wing turd? I don't know. I hope not. He and, James Arness, Matt Dillon? They were brothers. But working along the same theme on this Trumptanic Tuesday, faux white conservative, white conservative faux concern for, let's just say this clip is going to be from Fox News TV Radio Rwanda, and a truly outraged Fox attack blonde by the name of Katie Pavlich. And for some reason or another, over on Fox, and you can guess what the reason is, they decided to have a little chit-chat about, wait for it, ominous music, please, reparations. Because nothing gets Emery and Marveline stoked up quite like reparations. The idea that there is still a debt owed for what was done to generations upon generations of African Americans, people stolen from their own land and brought here to this one and forced to work without pay, having their lives and labors stolen from them from one generation to the next until, it took a lot of bloody business and a lot of bloodshed to make it stop. And even then, it didn't stop. Mm-hmm. So consequently, we get Katie Pavlich squaring off against Kennedy something, and the following discussion of reparations ensued. Again, with no good faith desire to actually discuss the issue. I, for one, support them. But instead, solely to inflame the leaky-brained freaks who sit in their Barca loungers and get up in the morning and push the button, and the TV's on Fox, and it just never changes for the rest of the day, unless they, maybe they switch away a little bit when that Shepard Smith is on, because I think he's a closet commie. But they're right back there shortly thereafter. They take a break for a little Murder, She Wrote, and then or Matlock, and then we're back at it. Yeah, take it away.
idea that we're only getting, that the swing states are controlling the conversation is not true. But I want to cede my time to Harris on a topic we were discussing. The second topic that you mentioned about the issue of reparations. A number of Democrats have come out in favor of that, and I know that you have some strong feelings about it.
I have strong feelings because, look, I know our history. It's a shared history with slavery in this country. I get it. And I also understand that reparations are kind of in that spirit of what we can do to make the past right. I'm raising children, and what I try to teach them is that we want.
I should probably mention that Harris Faulkner is an African-American woman, just for the sake of clarity. She's the one who's talking now.
To make the future bright. We can't always correct the past, but what we can do is we can create jobs. We can create opportunities. We can teach people to fish rather than just eating fish, as the Bible says. I'm paraphrasing, obviously.
Obviously, because the real verse is, give a man a fish, you've fed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, and you've given him a reason to sit by the bank of on the bank of the river and drink beer for the rest of his life. That's what the Bible verse says.
And so my concern about reparations or apologies and all of that is that we're trying to fix something that is so incredibly broken in the past, but we're taking our eye off the ball of the future. You could take some of that same money and create some opportunities for young people. You could train.
¿Por qué lo das?
There are a whole bunch of things you could do with that cash. You also have a strong view on this from a different perspective.
I have two pretty strong views. I mean, they keep blaming America for...
The little white blonde girl has two pretty strong views. Well, tell us, Attack Blonde, what they are. And the history of slavery is a shared history in this country. Did you catch that earlier? Yeah, that beats cats fucking too.
The sin of slavery, but the truth is, throughout human history, slavery has existed, and America came along as the first country to end it within 150 years. And
what, Edith? Huh? The United States is somehow special? 150 years. Wait a minute. I suck at ciphering, so might have to ought to get the calculator out. Let's go 1865 minus 150. Huh. Ma'am, your ciphering is worse than mine is. 1865 minus 150 is 1715. Kind of interesting for her to cite that 150 number, especially in light of the fact that this year is the 400th anniversary of the first stolen Africans being brought to mainland North America for purposes of stealing their lives and labor from them. And so she's off by 96 years under the best of circumstances. But what's her thesis here? Let's go back and find out.
I have two pretty strong views. I mean, they keep blaming America for the sin of slavery, but the truth is, throughout human history, slavery has existed, and America came along as the first country to end it within 150 years. And we get no credit for that to move.
Nope, I was right. She's dumber in the head than a hog is in the ass.
Forward and try and make good on that.
We did have a very bloody civil war.
Or over that
and
issue.
We also, and the remnants
are a long time.
The racial history, and the remnants of the Civil War, particularly blacks in the South.
Correct.
Yes. That was not an easy path. I mean, that was bloody and violent and deadly.
And there were Native Americans here when we showed up.
Yeah, we're still. My point is that we were the country that decided to end it, and we're still dealing with the issue. But if you want to start a problem and to inflame racial tension even more, start blaming people who have nothing to do with slavery for the sin of slavery.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to inflame tensions, start blaming people who weren't even born in 1944 for what happened at Dachau and Bergen-Belsen and Auschwitz. Start blaming people who weren't even alive in 1942 for what happened when patriotic American citizens who happened to be of Japanese ancestry were rounded up, had their property stolen from them, and were falsely imprisoned for years on end. Well, because that's what Emery and Marveline and Bubba and Peggy Sue sitting there watching the Outnumbered. That's what they're saying. Well, I ain't never fenced in no Japanese. And I ain't never tooken no land from no Indians. And I didn't gas nobody in no death camps. Interesting, however, that in the cases in the case of people in the case of reparations paid for crimes against humanity and for the vicious racist internment of Japanese Americans, the reparations were paid anyway because they were due and owing. Now, is there somewhat of a difference insofar as the reparations were paid to actual survivors or the families of survivors? That's a little bit different. But this country should not be able to skate on an obligation simply because it's stonewalled long enough for the functional equivalent of the statute of limitations to run. That is an outrageous suggestion. And it's not one that can be supported intellectually. I do not profess to have the answer to what reparations should be, but I've got a pretty good idea that they remain due and owing, because just about anywhere you go in the eastern seaboard of the United States, you can find the results of the stolen labor. It's especially, yeah, and I wonder if there's a tour you can take in Washington, D.C. of stolen labor, because it could start at the United States Capitol. It could wander on down to the White House. It could cross the river and go into Arlington National Cemetery and take note of the big mansion, the big house that sits up on the hill. That was the Lee Custis Manor. Robert E. Lee was kind of a deadbeat all of his life, but he did marry money. Custis money. And trust me, there was not a brick laid in that building that was laid by Custis' hands. We can look at the early outline of roads in this country. Again, the wealth class didn't put a finger toward their construction, but people whose lives and labor were stolen did. And the law recognizes a means of calculate. And look, before anybody gets a check, we have to calculate how much is due and owing. And this is part of what scares these ignorant white people half to damn death. Because if you set about the task of determining the economic value today of labor and lives stolen over the course of 400 years, it's going to be a huge number. Huge. But we haven't even bothered with that. But frosted blonde privilege girl here, she doesn't even want to do that. She's just angry. She just loves America. I just love America. And why don't we get any credit for ending slavery? Well, you know what, sister? The North does get credit for ending slavery. The South, however, the South has to share in the damnation of trying to keep it going. Where are you from, Katie? Oh, wait, I know what her plea would be. My white people weren't even in the United States when before slavery was ended. We don't have anything to do with that. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. The government that sort of let your family in here, if your ancestors didn't just sort of sneak in, like, say, the ancestors of Tommy Lauren up in North Dakota, who was busted for illegal immigration and then given a mercy verdict and let him stay, even though he was stone cold guilty. You've benefited from it. And so this doubles back on the issue of white privilege that was so cynically brought up by David McIntosh of the Club for Helmet Hair Growth. Privilege is all around us. And why should we not begin with a conversation of what it is, how it operates, and how we can level the playing field? And for anybody who would say, well, you can't give them people a check. Why not? You're only paying them for what was stolen from their ancestors. Money that can be verifiably proven to have been stolen. And hey, you know what the other thing you can do is? You can look at the families who were doing the stealing, and you can trace their money too. That's the funny thing about money. You can trace it. And you can find it in 1840 or 1830 or 1810 or 1720. And you can watch it do its magic down through the generations all the way to today. Why don't we at least start by trying to establish who got the stolen wealth and what they did with it? Because I guarantee you that stolen labor and that stolen wealth is still working for the people who stole it to this very day. It damn sure is. And you know what? It takes a lot of white privilege to sit there on Fox and say, why don't we get any credit for ending it? We ended it in only 150 years. Well, hell's bells. All that woman's doing is proving how hopelessly ignorant she is. The Romans and the Greeks both had laws regarding slavery. The Old Testament, the Torah, and the Talmud are chock-a-block with rules about how you go about running a slave society. Here's the fun part, though. Slavery in the ancient world was not the same as the chattel slavery of the Old South. The chattel slavery of the Old South was actually kind of a new and different form. In the ascendancy of the Roman Republic and then the Roman Empire, people who had skills were at economic disadvantage. Let's say you were really good at teaching Homer and teaching the Iliad and the Odyssey. You could sell yourself into slavery as a Greek academic and be purchased by a Roman noble family to be a tutor to their children, and along the way, you could make your own money and buy your own freedom. In that sense, that sort of ancient world slavery more closely resembles the so-called indentured servitude that attended the beginnings of this country than anything that chattel slavery would ever have been. Chattel slavery in the ancient world was reserved for things like the silver mines in Spain. And it was for people you hated, and you really didn't care if they lived or died. You mostly preferred they died. They had no value beyond what they could do from one day to the next in the mines. The Western, and particularly the Anglo-English, the Anglo-American idea of property ownership did not attach. But Emery and Marveline watching today over on Fox News TV Radio Rwanda, well, they had no idea. It was interesting because Soledad O'Brien suggested that Frosted Katie Pavlich was a complete moron. And she got butthurt. Katie Pavlich got butthurt. And she said, I should have said of first countries from the point of founding. No, stupid, because from the point of founding would not have been 1715. My argument stands, but please, Soledad, please continue name-calling as your argument and the smearing of America as the originator of slavery. Man, it's like my old torts professor said, in this world there are fools, damn fools, and goddamn fools. And Katie Pavlich is a goddamned fool. No, your argument, no, it doesn't stand. She has no conception of the differences between American-style slavery and the so-called slavery of the Bible and the slavery of the ancient world. By the way, England, after its own deeply divisive debate, simply ended slavery by operation of law. There's an old quote out there about the United States that says, understand that the United States will, after every other option has been exhausted, do the right thing. But that's the problem, is getting around to doing the right thing. The English, as I noted, simply ended slavery by operation of a statute passed by Parliament. They'd already had their not just one civil war, but several, and they all proved to just be an unleashing of rivers of blood. So that one they just ended, by operation of law. It's kind of interesting because there's a parallel with the New Zealand massacre. After Sandy Hook and after Parkland and after Aurora, Colorado, and after Tucson, and after Columbine, and after an attack on a Sikh temple in Wisconsin, and after an attack on a historic African-American church in Charleston, South Carolina, after massacre after massacre after massacre after massacre, we have we have one side of the political debate in this country who controls the nature of the debate, who says, "Oh, we can't talk about it right now. It's too soon. The wound is too raw. We can't politicize this." And so we continue to have massacres. And we have people who commit massacres in synagogues. And we have people who send bombs through the mail. And we have commissioned officers in the United States Coast Guard who plan mass killings and genocide itself. Most all of whom, by the way, had some degree of association with the type of right-wing politics espoused and advanced by Donald Trump. And nothing gets done. But just as England eventually took a look at slavery and simply ended it by operation of a statute passed by Parliament, Australia, after the Port Arthur massacre, said, well, that's enough. We don't ever want that to happen again, and took affirmative measures. And there's not been another Port Arthur massacre in Australia. One of the unknown facts about New Zealand is that it's not quite the happy place that has been portrayed, and that in Christchurch, New Zealand, particular, there was an undercurrent and a cell of vicious, murderous, right-wing, racist hate. But lo and behold, the massacre happened in Christchurch. And the government of New Zealand and the people of New Zealand, there was no hand-wringing. There was no, oh, it's too soon. Oh, don't politicize this. Oh, what if we ever have to rise up and use our freedom protectors because the New Zealand government's got its hobnailed boots down on our freedom-loving necks where we've got the tattoos that say only God can judge me. That ain't there. They are simply moving swiftly and with determination to making sure that one of the primary reasons the massacre in Christchurch happened must not happen again. But the United States, no. In the United States, there will be another massacre, and another massacre after that, and another massacre after that, and an organization that has taken shitloads of money from a tyrannical, authoritarian, dictatorial state that has a vested interest in having America at its own, trying to commit suicide, the NRA, which took ever so many goddamn rubles, continues to poison the process so that more children will die. More mothers, more fathers, more freshmen, sophomores, seniors. And so what we have is a sort of across-the-board proof of the essential failings of this country. Let's see. Let's go check in a little mail. Drinking beer by the river and fishing. Lee in New York says, thank you for citing the new translation of the Book of Miller, Light Edition. Well done, Lee. Today's lesson will be from the Book of Coors. No, I'm sorry. Today's lesson will be from 2 Coors. And meanwhile, Scott says, no, teach a man, that ain't in the Bible, Old Testament or New Testament, or even the index, mini concordance in the back. I recall a story in the New Testament, one of the Gospels, in which the disciples are worried about paying their taxes. Instead of conjuring up some dough so they can render unto Caesar, the good Lord takes the guys fishing, whereupon, and verily, they catch a big one. Jesus opens the fish's mouth, and there's a shiny coin, which they can go and pay their taxes. I'd love to have a chapter and verse cite on that, Scott. That sounds like a fun one. Our buddy Earther says, subject line, reparations. Yeah, Kincaid, we'll just raise the minimum wage by 25 cents. Reparations accomplished. And America is, not recognized for all the good that we've done for black people. And America was the first country north of the Rio Grande and south of the 45th parallel to end slavery. And what about Chicago? Black on black? I just love America. Lowest black unemployment. Covfefe, Pepe, hamburgers. And yes, what we're talking about, what England did, Robert was in Australia was kind enough to provide the information. The Slavery Abolition Act of 1833 abolished slavery throughout the British Empire. Did that woman say the USA was the first? Yes, she did, because, well, she's dumber than a bag of hammer handles. That's why she's got the job she has. The Slavery Abolition Act of 1833 abolished slavery throughout the British Empire, and that meant it was abolished in more than one country, one of which was Canada. Canada got rid of slavery in 1833 by operation of the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833. And Mexico, as Earther pointed out, beat us to the punch, too. I think I mentioned the fact that that was part of the little philosophical debate that caused the aggrieved, cranky white people in the Mexican state of Texas to decide to start shooting at the Mexican government. You know, because they had these American notions of a Second Amendment, and when the government puts its boot heel down on your freedom-loving neck, you got to get your freedom protector out and form your well-regulated militia and shoot, and start shooting and keep shooting at the government. Yeah. So they did that. Just remember, whenever you hear a Republican and a gun freak talk about having to rise up against an oppressive government, what they're thinking of is, at least in part, what they did to the Mexican government in Texas. And it should be remembered that during the era of the Confederacy, they actually drafted plans. No, they really did. For the conquest of Mexico, all of Central America, Cuba, the rest of the Caribbean, and in fact, the entire Western Hemisphere, to turn it into a slavery hellscape. Sometimes history's not so cool. Sometimes it doesn't support you when you say things like, America was the first country to ever abolish slavery. I try to stay away from rhetoric that could be seen as sexist or misogynistic. And so I'm not going to start now. I'll simply say that they pay her the vast amounts of money that Fox pays Katie Pavlich. They pay her to be that stupid and that airheaded. Because over on the right-wing side, it's the coin of the realm. And by the way, at the halfway mark of the program, or a little bit more, we've still got $130 to go on a fundraising challenge courtesy of our buddy John. We badly need to knock this out. I'm not kidding. Among other things, me being gone tomorrow evening is just going to make things even harder as far as finishing out the month is concerned. And, well, it takes money to do these kinds of things. So if we could knock out that 130 and just get ourselves down to only $310 in the hole, that would take a great weight off of my tiny mind. For those of you who are following along at home, if you want to find the coin in the fish's mouth story, it's there. It's one of Jesus's probably less talked about miracles, but you can find it. And Scott took me at my word and provided us chapter and verse, Matthew 17:24 through 27. So, like I said, we're a little past the halfway point of the program. And if we could, we're going to take a break and check in with Brad and Desi. And maybe, hey, could we get it down to $100? That'd be cool, too. That'd mean we'd only have 100 to go for the rest of the program. Please. What's happening, Brad and Desi?
It's Tuesday, March 19, 2019.
Traveling between cities is going to be very, very difficult.
Devastating floods in the upper Midwest as Missouri River blows through levees.
More than 1,000 people may have died.
Powerful cyclone plows across Mozambique.
The best officials can hope for right now is to keep the other tanks around the 7 that are on fire from catching on fire.
Petrochemical refinery fire spreads toxic smoke in Houston. Plus, the kids' climate strike that was heard round the world.
I hope it was. All of those catastrophes and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
For many people who live in the West, but also in rural and urban areas, the ideas behind the Green New Deal are tantamount to genocide.
Tantamount to genocide? Congressman Rob Bishop of Utah? Really? Isn't that just a bit of an overstatement?
That may be an overstatement, but not by a whole lot.
Actually, by a whole lot. On the other hand, climate change? That's tantamount. Well, you don't care. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, boy, that's a whole lot of disasters you got there in our teaser today.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's true. Then there is a growing humanitarian disaster unfolding in the southeastern African nations of Zimbabwe, Malawi, and Mozambique after powerful Cyclone Idai struck overnight on Sunday, causing widespread damage to transportation infrastructure, electricity, communications, and fresh water access, particularly in the metropolitan area of Beira, Mozambique, which suffered a direct hit. The International Red Cross reports that 90% of the city of Beira has been, quote, completely destroyed. Hundreds are confirmed dead, but the death toll is likely to climb as high as 1,000.
1,000 dead from one single cyclone.
Yep. Here in the U.S.,
we have the most widespread flooding damage, at least in a half century, maybe in our entire state's history.
thousands of families have been forced to evacuate in Nebraska, Iowa, and Missouri, and at least 2 people have been killed in historic floods along the upper Missouri River, caused by a record bomb cyclone late last week. The storm rapidly intensified in less than 24 hours, thus the bomb cyclone name, and dumped record snowfall in Wyoming and Nebraska. But the rain melted the snowpack, compounding the flooding. The flood shattered records in Nebraska, tearing up bridges, roads, levees, and dams, swamping sewage and water treatment systems. On NPR, Nebraska's Republican Governor Pete Ricketts warned that the flooding could potentially get even worse.
All of the levees are compromised in at least some way, so we're very concerned about the ability for those levees to hold. We're 2, 3, 4 feet over the tops of the levees.
And this is also affecting a number of military bases where, as I understand it, after record flooding in 2015, they built levees to deal with 1,000-year floods, but those levees have been overtopped by about 4 or 5 feet?
Yes. U.S. Air Force Strategic Command at Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha, STRATCOM, was flooded despite those new flood controls. This comes just 5 months after Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida sustained more than $5 billion in damages from Hurricane Michael, a storm that also underwent rapid intensification. And by the way, this flooding is not over yet. More evacuations are in store as those floodwaters head downstream.
Donald Trump was putting together a presidential blue ribbon commission to respond to the U.S. military and their warnings about climate change being a danger to national security and military bases. Will they be meeting while all of this is going on?
Probably not. In other news, outside of Houston, Texas, classes were canceled and residents ordered to shelter in place due to a cloud of toxic smoke from a major fire that broke out on Sunday morning at a petrochemical refinery plant. Officials say the fire will burn for at least 2 more days. No injuries were reported and the cause is under investigation. It is the 3rd refinery fire in the United States in 2 days, one in Los Angeles and another one in the Houston area. Finally, some good news. Teens around the world staged a global climate strike on Friday, walking out of school to demand their governments take action on climate change. More than 1.4 million teens in at least 123 countries organized and marched in more than 1,600 events worldwide, including more than 130 U.S. cities. 16-year-old Swedish teen climate activist and now Nobel Peace Prize nominee Greta Thunberg, who inspired the strike, told CNN that they will keep the pressure on.
I think just that we should just continue until they do something, because this is not a one-time thing. We are not just protesting to let them see that we care. We are protesting until they do something. We are going to put pressure on them.
Good, Greta. Please do keep the pressure on. I'll tell you, had they heard today's Green News Report, we would have had twice as many kids out there in the street around the world. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us, follow us, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Better fade that pretty quick before it screws up the file. God, I love that song. That's just love it. Note coming in from Ralphs, who does a lot to support the program. Subject line: come on, people. Don't make me sit. Bleh, I'm ruining this. Come on, people, don't make me sick my cat crook on y'all. Meow. Yeah, don't do it. You don't want that. So hopefully we'll knock out John's challenge. I hate to see a perfectly good challenge go to waste when we can, when people give other members of the community a chance to double their contribution. That's a pretty big deal. I know things have been kind of grim. By the way, no, before we go there, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on with the stress line. I was having a problem earlier getting it to connect to Bluetooth, and I couldn't seem to do it during the break. I tried very hard to, very hard, Jesus. You see what 2 years of Donald Trump does to you? You wind up talking like a third grader. I tried to get the Bluetooth to connect, and I didn't have any luck, but if you want to try it, you're welcome to. 844-843-4676. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. As far as I can tell, the other line with which we had problems last week, well, it appears to be working. Hey, wow, that's huge. Elizabeth, thank you so much, Elizabeth. Elizabeth just took us down to, wait, let me see, ciphering, only $55 to go to meet John's challenge. And that's tremendous. Now, hopefully, surely to goodness, in the next, 16 minutes or so, we can knock down the other $50. I certainly hope so. By the way, I noticed something last night. I had a caller on the line at the end of the program, and I had taken the call, but the way the Skype interface looks now, it is very easy for me to not see, not yet, not tonight. It's easy for me to not realize that there's a call waiting. So if I do that, I apologize. Not by way of excuse, but by explanation. I have to keep my eyes sort of roving Cylon-like side to side across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 computer monitors because, well, I'm just back here producing this on my own. And if I miss you at some point, please accept my apologies and don't think that that meant that I didn't want you to say what you had to say. Okay? So, because I've done that a couple of times and it makes me feel terrible. And it's only later that I do get to feel terrible. So that's another thing. But it looks like we do have a call from Tracy. Hey, Tracy.
So white people are calling out other white people about white privilege?
Why, yes, as a matter of fact. And it's helmet-headed white people.
When I was driving, and I'm like, what the entire... See, what you were looking for instead of white man please was bitch please. It's like,
I don't do that. I have tried to take that word out of my vocabulary.
I know, but you were thinking it. Okay, maybe you weren't thinking it.
No, what I was thinking was cracker please, but that's just...
It don't have to say...
I'm gonna piss off somebody and I'll get an email. It's racism too, Bob.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, it is. I mean, but I'm just, when you're
okay. Hey, let's find a way around this real quick, Tracy, because we solve problems on this program.
Okay.
This will resonate with people of a certain age. In the case of Dave McIntosh, it's easy. Race banning, please.
Yes, Johnny Quest, exactly. Because see, I have no idea. Most of the time, when you talk about, especially like you and Todd or you and Scott, you guys start talking about people I've never heard of, and then I have to go on to the Google to look them up, and I'm like, this McIntosh dude, never heard of him. So but that is, again, he's a specious piece of crap, and I don't care to know who he is.
Cowbell for specious. Yes.
So I don't care, because knowing who he is not going to improve my life whatsoever. So it's like, we all have a finite time left on this earth. And I choose to trying to, when I expend my energy, that I will never, like that. Like when you watch something on TV or you hear something on the radio, that's like, I will never get that time back. I can't say, my spirit animal, spirit warrior, Maxine Waters, I can't reclaim my time. So it's like, I'm learning only energy on bullshit. How about that? I mean, but unfortunately, because of the time that we live in and the people that are, are in charge of our world and our country, unfortunately, there's a large amount of time that is spent on bullshit, because in the long run, it does, affect me, because, Black people. And, so this whole thing, these people having it's so funny. I know you don't watch Madam Secretary, but it's so funny because there was a line in Sunday's episode. They were talking about reparations, not about for Black people, but because this there was this horrible storm, and because climate change, and it literally just wiped out an entire island. But before it wiped out the island, they were talking about reparations to people of these countries that are directly by climate change, and what we're going to do about it. And all these countries like our country and coal producers are basically sucking up our environment. We something has to be done. So when I hear people go on, so there was a line. So funny, and they were talking about reparations, and she's like, nothing scares rich white people more than the word reparations. So, and then about
so I unintentionally echoed. Cool.
Yeah. So and like you said, nothing freaks white folks out more than the word reparations. But here's the deal. Okay, let's take out the argument about having reparations for slavery. Okay, and it's like, because you're saying there's no, the people's main arguments are that at this point, like you said, because this, if you go there, the statute of limitations has definitely effectively run out. Okay, let's forget slavery. Let's just start about segregation or redlining, or how the FHA intentionally kept Black people from being able to get low-cost home loans, or to take, the gutting of the the Voting Rights Act, that has effectively made sure that most Black people who want to vote cannot vote. I mean, let's talk about the preschool to prison pipeline. Let's talk about the cash bail system. Let's talk about, do I need to go on?
No, I think you've got a pretty good handle on it. I mean, you can. That's the problem. You can go on because you're just scratching the surface.
Okay.
But I'd like to see, and the person who did it would probably at least get nominated for the Nobel Prize in economics. A detailed economic analysis, reduced to present value, of every penny of stolen, of every penny of the value of stolen labor for 400 years.
Exactly, and like you were, like how when you talk, and especially the Bible thumpers, Bible bangers, or what have you, and slavery was in the Bible, and blah blah blah. Peep this, my brother from another mother. Listen to this, straight from the Bible. And if thy brother, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, be sold unto thee, and serve 3 years, then in the 7th year thou shalt let him go free from thee. And when thou sendest him out free from thee, thou shalt not let him go away empty. Thou shalt fetch him liberally out of thy floor, and out of thy floor, and out of that wherewith the Lord thy God hath blessed thee, thou shalt give unto him. And thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondman in the land of Egypt, and the Lord thy God redeemed thee. Therefore, I command thee this thing today. So, in other words, like you were talking about, the whole thing about slavery back in the day was basically their version of indentured servitude, because from what I remember from my history book, servants were only had to be a servant for 7 years, and after 7 years they were done. Am I right on that?
That's interesting. I had never made that connection, but in so-called indentured servitude was time barred by a written contractual arrangement.
Right.
And there are some people from Africa who do become indentured servants, like white folks do in the early colonial era. They are not nearly as prevalent as kidnapped human beings are.
No.
But here's the other side of that coin too, and this was an early source of tension between indigenous cultures and white culture in the early colonies. People who were under indenture were often mistreated, and I want to be very, very careful, Tracy, going onto this ground, because there's an entire subset of white supremacist, Klan, Nazi, neo-Nazi thinking that you can file under. What about the Irish? And it's a completely deconstructed chunk of bullshit. It has no validity as proven by an Irish scholar.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact of the matter is, people who were indentured did bug out. They left. And if you were indentured and you were anywhere near a Native American society, many of those cultures would welcome you in under the general guise of welcoming the stranger. That's another common thread that runs through most civilizations' idea of the sacred. And that is, you don't shit on the stranger.
Well, that was, as much as, it's that bullshit about Sodom and Gomorrah and sodomites and all that bullshit. Yeah, no, Sodom and Gomorrah, God came down and ripped Sodom and Gomorrah a new one, not because of, the
gay
anal sex, the gay, because they turned their backs on the strangers.
And it's there in Ezekiel, where it says, "This was the sin of thy sister Sodom, ... that she treated the strangers among them like shit."
Right. And then the strangers turned out to be, guess what, angels, and they fucked them up. That's not how, that's there's an underreported piece of American history.
There were lots of frontier people who cast their lots with the indigenous cultures that they ran up against, because their lives were so much better than the white Anglo-Saxon, German, Scots-Irish life in the frontier settlements and communities. There's a very, very famous. There I am with the very, very again. Sorry. There's a famous historical account. I mean, it really happened, of a woman named Mary Ingalls, not Mary Ingalls Wilder or Laura Ingalls Wilder. Mary Ingalls.
Laura.
And it's in pre-revolutionary Virginia. And she and her husband and some other white folks had moved into areas that were pretty clearly Indian lands. And the Indians didn't take kindly to it. And they raided the settlement, burned it to the ground, and took the people with them. Well, it became a famous story that was turned into a book, and there was a history of it called Follow. The book is called Follow the River, because Mary Ingalls was in captivity, and she eventually escaped and came back to white society. What gets underreported is the number of people who were carried away by the Indians who went there. Women, for instance, a woman in Native society had rights. In fact, in Shawnee culture, you could not go to war without the women's permission. And because the guys are also, I'm gonna go, guys, I'm gonna go over there and kick that ass. Yeah, he looked at me the wrong way.
He pissed me up. He looked at me the wrong.
Yeah.
He stepped on my moccasin.
And I'm gonna fuck him up. And the women's council was there to say, "Oh, shut up, Junior. Sit down. We are not going to war." And they actually, because they, and isn't this interesting to think about? The native populations were carefully managed so that they wouldn't eat themselves out of house and home. And so the women's council in some of these groups would determine when a woman could and could not conceive. Not because of some authoritarian impulse, but because if everybody starts spitting out babies, next thing you know, everybody's going to starve. Because it was a densely populated continent. And they were determined not to exceed the what we know as carrying capacity. So a lot of people wound up in indigenous society and stayed. I mean, they did things like bathing. They bathed frequently. They had a diet that was far more varied than anything the frontiers people were eating. It was tasty, and for the men, once they became integrated into the tribal group, life was really good. You pretty much lay around. And you go out and you go out hunting and stuff, and every now and then the women folk will let you go out and brawl a little bit and get the testosterone out of your system. And it worked, for 10,000 years. It worked better for 10,000 years than white culture in Europe had worked for 10,000 years. And so that there's no argument to be made on the part of these assholes like the Proud Boys and Identity Evropa and all of that silly crap to suggest that European culture was somehow superior. It wasn't. It just happened to be more violent and more effective at killing other people.
Thank you. I mean, it's matter, and language matters. And when of course, we all, you and I are around this. You're a couple of years older than me, so we basically had to say in 1492, Christopher Columbus, sailed the ocean blue and blah 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 bullshit, and it's that word discovered, because when you say you discovered something,
you found something nobody else knew about.
So the wordsmith, you found nobody been there, blemish. You are the being to set.
Marie Curie discovered radium.
Thank you.
Big difference.
So, big difference. You can't discover something when people already living here. You can't. It's like when I was thinking, about this, like manifest destiny. When I back in, in the 70s during, Schoolhouse Rock, and that song, elbow room, every, and and when I'm thinking about this shit, I'm like, motherfuckers, they're talking about manifest destiny. That twisted and sick idea that, because God, and we have the right to bulldoze an entire group of people and steal their land because God. And I'm like, no, that is not how this shit works. You just, so, when you're talking about reparations, you stop at Black people. What about the indigenous people and their descendants? because they got it up the butt as bad as we did. So hold on, Kendra, mommy's on the phone. Shut up. And then she barks at me. So it's like these things that when white people get their cackles up, it's like no. You can't, because then when we talk about again when they try to pull that, well, the statute of limitations have run out on what you have done to Native people, but then you go, well, no, because what about alcoholism, the high people, the poverty of Native people. Again, I can go on. What do we do about that?
Yeah, and in point of fact, along those same lines, I just got a note from Ron in Raleigh. White slave owners wanted to be compensated for the value of their emancipated slaves. When emancipation happened, they insisted that they be paid. Because they be paid for the value of the labor that they had been stealing. It's like if the police catch you in a stolen car, someone. Damn. Let's say somebody catches me in a stolen car, and I look at the police.
I'm not that sensitive. I know what you meant.
Yeah, let's say somebody catches me in a stolen car, and I look at the police and say, well, okay, I stole the car, but I got it now, and possession's 9/10 of the law. So if you want to take the stolen car away from me, you're going to have to pay me for the stolen car.
Or even better, a motherfucker breaks into my house. They hurt themselves. They slip and break a leg or something. And they turn around and sue me because they hurt themselves while they were breaking into my house.
Actually, they can be compensated for that, but never mind.
I know.
That's one of the more maddening aspects of tort law in some places. But Ron cites, as an example, Haiti. Haiti, he says, is the dirt poor country it is today because they had to pay their French slave owners who weren't paid off until the 1940s.
Are you serious?
Yeah. I did know about that, but Ron brought it to mind. White people don't want to embrace the evil committed against the people of color, and that is why they're able to embrace the Confederacy, but don't believe it has anything to do with slavery and the evil that flows from it. Slavery and Jim Crow are the very foundation of modern American society, and that's absolutely true, Tracy, and it brings me to a second point. And that is this. I appreciate the fact, anything, well, you know me. I appreciate I appreciate the fact that we are having meaningful discussions about the impacts of racism in our society. But I think we would do well, and not from some sense of providing a little bit of way down upon the Swanee River nostalgia for the white supremacists, but just for the sake of knowing history. If every time someone brings up the subject of racism in this country, if there was a hype man standing by to say, and racism was the official policy of the United States of America until 1965. Because it was.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's younger than me by 2 years. I was born in America. I was born, and I'm not just talking about the South. It was pervasive throughout the country. It was more rule than exception.
I mean, people have this thing about, California and just, hippies and, free love and all that other bullshit. Look, my mother was born here in 1949. She was 16 years old. She grew up in South Central. She was 16 years old before she even went west of Crenshaw Boulevard. It was like, wait, what? Because there were boundaries. Go. I mean, you didn't. Oh, it wasn't like, in the South where the chances are you would get shot. Well, unless you got caught by the cops. There was a likely, if you're going, these spaces where it is perceived that you should not be because, not because you're a criminal, not because you're black, you're already perceived as a criminal automatically. So therefore, the cops can pull you over or, harass you for walking. Many occasions when he would be walking home from school, not from school, but from work, which he never told me about because he knew I would be at the police station and more than likely getting arrested. But, these spaces, so there was major redlining in California, in Los Angeles. I mean, hell, Jewish people only lived in Boyle Heights. We're going to go out. Jewish people were not allowed out of Boyle Heights until after World War II. I mean, you remember that movie Gentleman's Agreement, right?
Oh, very much.
That shit was real. So
what did Groucho Marx say in regard to the segregated country clubs? I wouldn't belong to a club that would have me as a member.
As a member anyway. Exactly. So it's like, this revisionist history. I wouldn't even call it revisionist. Ignored. As though it never even happened. So these things that people, tunnel vision, or, they have this idea of what America is, and, and it does not involve anybody that doesn't look like, white people, that other people are on the periphery trying to take, what is, these people deem as, theirs, rightfully theirs. And I'm like, I'm not trying to take shit from you. I just want what is promised to me as an American citizen. That's all I care about. Because my ancestors fucking built this country. And like I said, I have now found out about my great-grandfather. And he was born, again, I forget, but basically, he was, born, I don't think he was born a slave, but he was born like right after slavery ended, which means.
And you said part of your family came out of Louisiana, right?
Louisiana. The part that I know more about is Shreveport, Louisiana, and my great-grandfather, the one that I found about out on Ancestry.com, was from Missouri, Jefferson City, Missouri, or Springfield, I forget. But it's like, so I know for a fact, I never knew where my family is, where. But as I start doing more, because then again, remember when, black people were born, especially during slavery, there were no birth certificates because they were property.
So when you got your ancestry report back, and I remember when we talked about it, did it show any indigenous Native American in there at all?
Andes, Colombian. Let's see, it showed because I'm like, oh my God, because they keep as once they get your DNA, I know it's kind of frightening, but they're continued. They do tests on your DNA to the point where they give you deeper analysis of your background. And so at first, when they first did it, it was only it showed no native ancestry, but then it showed Native American Andean 1%, and it says Native American Andean primarily located in Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and Ecuador.
Yeah, see, it's one of the little secrets is that it's my understanding Native communities have been very guarded and suspicious about having anybody cataloging their DNA for very good reasons. Yeah, but one of the reasons I ask is based on that one little factoid that I learned in that rock and roll documentary on PBS a while back. And that is, there are a lot of people who are deemed to be African American by operation of the ancient one drop rule, who are actually African American, Native American.
Exactly. I mean, according to my breakdown, my ethnicity estimate. 37% Cameroon, Congo, and Southern Bantu people, 25% Benin, Togo, and this is the part that tickles me the most, 16% England, Wales, and Northwestern Europe.
Yep.
8% Nigeria, 5% Mali, 5% Ireland and Scotland, 3% Ivory Coast and Ghana, and then, like I said, 1% Native American Andean. So, I'm an American.
Yeah, or as Bill Murray says in, what is it, Stripes? You're a mutt. We're all mutts.
You're a mutt. We're all mutts. So there is if this country had any sense, we would embrace that, because especially, I'm sorry, if I was a white person who, was just, a rather somewhat cool white person and just boring, and just because, white and bland, I would be so excited if I did my DNA test and found out that there was something else in me that says I could actually be considered cool. That's just me.
No, that's actually me. I'm scared to death to do it because I'm just going to find out that
that you're just white.
Did Welsh and English and Scottish with a smattering of German and some Scandinavian, and end of story.
It's like, damn, when you, like you said, you're hoping. It's like, can I have something? But because the way.
Please give me please give me an excuse for all the spicy food I enjoy.
Yes, exactly. Please, let there be a reason, an explanation as to why I don't mind spice. I actually use salt on my food.
Something more than, yeah.
Something, that I love herbs and spices.
But then again, so do the French, so do the Germans. In a way, I think that is something, and this is going to sound kind of goofy. I think that's something that came.
You sound goofy. Come on.
I work at it every day. But I think that's something that happened with the destruction of extended families in this country, not just in Appalachia.
Right.
Because when you, as hard as people can try, and I've passed, there are recipes we have here that are hundreds of years old, and I've given them to our children. But it's not the same thing as being right there in the house every year when you do whatever it is you do for your holiday feasts or all the other little things.
Well,
Because I know for a fact that in the culture that I live in here in West Virginia, we have not always been deadly dull of taste bud. My own grandmother canned entire jars of fiery hot wax peppers. I'm not talking about those sweet, mellow banana peppers. I'm talking about things that would make you cry. And she would can jars. She would can jars of kraut with garlic and hot peppers in them that would light you up. And all of that, most of that is largely gone in this area now.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like my family. When I was growing up, I mean, on my mom's side and my dad's side of the family, especially my mom's side of the family, my father's side of the family was kind of sedity. So they had a couple of dollars in the bank. But I loved our family gatherings. I mean, my great grandmother was so gangster that when she had parties, Bob, she had a professional photographer at the party, dude.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and they were epic events. You hear me? But then as time, you know, a lot of the money, because my grandparents on my mom's side, my great grandparents had money. They had property all over Los Angeles. I mean, you know, if we still had any of that property, now it would be probably worth in the tens of millions. It was just that deep. But because of, you know, different kind of laws and how, you know, wealth is stolen, and on top of the fact my grandfather had serious mental illness and he wound up committing suicide, and my grandmother didn't really know how to take care of these properties or what have you, they lost everything pretty much because, you know, she didn't know how to take care of the business end of things. And of course, unscrupulous people swooped in and stole it, you know, and I can't say whether they were white, black, or indifferent. I just know it was stolen on top of, you know, about the whole thing about cash bail, property being put up for, you know, worthless motherfuckers who went to jail and, you know, put the house up for bail, and then they don't go to court or what have you, and you lose your home. So there was that too. So, you know, we bring it back to reparations. You know, because if there was no such thing as cash bail, then people would not, you know, you're basically, you know, when it comes to bail, you're being put in jail and you haven't even been convicted of a crime yet.
Right.
You're sitting in jail.
And I mean, the Constitution speaks to it as an affirmative right. Everyone, yes, except in the case of murder, everyone is entitled to a reasonable cash bail.
Reasonable.
And the problem is that weasel word, reasonable. Because reasonable means something different to a Jefferson Davis Beauregard Sessions III style judge in Alabama than it does to an enlightened judge in a Massachusetts or hopefully a California or yeah, right.
You know,
because if you don't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of, $100 bail is not reasonable.
Well, look what happened to Sandra Bland. I think, you know, it was cash or bond, and I think, you know, it was $500 to get her out of jail. You don't have $500. $500, you know, might as well, you know, be, you know, if you don't even have $50, $500 is, you know, or $5. It's like there was years back. I had some subscription to something, and I called them to cancel it. It was $5 a month. Okay, and this is when things were really tight for Alex and I. And the guy's like, when I called, and he's like, when I called to cancel, he's like, well, it's only $5 a month. What's the problem? And I took a deep breath and I said, sweetie, you don't know my circumstance.
And that's none of your business.
And it's none of your business. But let me just break it down. Let me break this down to you. $5 a month can make the difference between somebody's paying their rent, paying a light bill, or whatever the case may be. So before you ever say that to somebody else again, you think about that. When people are, on fixed incomes or working 2 jobs and all these things that people do to survive, they need every damn penny that they can get their hands on. Just, what is that? Try to make $1 out of 15 cents.
Yeah, or the opposite, or the opposite of that. What's the best way to become a millionaire? The easiest way to become a millionaire? Start with $999,999.99.
Right. And just when you remember I told you about the it's hard to believe there's something on BET worth watching, but the Fighting Justice docuseries, the first episode was about Stand Your Ground, and this week's episode was about Cash Bell, and they highlighted or put a spotlight on St. Louis, Missouri, in this place called the Workhouse, and how it's like 700 people in that facility, and the average time that most people are in jail before they even before their cases even come up for trial is up to like some people 5 years, and they haven't even gone to court, all because they couldn't afford bail. And do you think about Roger Stone? How much was his bail?
No, just take a walk on what, $1 million?
Right.
Or $1 million bail on Lori Loughlin.
Right. But at least then Lori Loughlin, at least she had to pay some money.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Roger Stone didn't even have to pay. He just signed his name. It's like, okay, I'm going to sign my name, and I promise I'll be back.
On the other hand, that's kind of fun because he's got a gag order on him now, and I'd if I was a betting man, I'd take odds on the ability of him to keep.
I would take odds of him to keep his mouth shut
and to keep his money. See, that's the other side of bail. Let's say you make bail and you pay in. Let's say it's $500. You pay $500 into the court to get out. Well, here's the funny thing: if you're charged with a crime, odds are you're never going to see that $500 again, unless you are acquitted, and then you're going to have to fight like a dog. Hi, Kimba. To get your money back.
Yeah, right.
Because they'll apply it to court costs, they'll apply it to a fine, they'll apply it to victims' compensation, anything to keep from giving you the money back.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and by the way, we just got a note in from Lady B. Back to our DNA conversation. Bob, would the results of your DNA test just have you check off the following boxes? A, white. B, snow white. C, blinded by the white. D, invisible. And I think that's I think that's really unfair because I have freckles, and that means that there's some melanin in there somewhere.
But she forgot the other category. Sunburned by the refrigerator light.
Sunburned by the refrigerator bulb. Exactly. Or has to put solar cane on to reach into the oven when it ain't on. When it's just the light bulb.
Wait, here's another thing. I know you read.
Endangered by Christmas tree lights. Yeah.
Here's this another thing. Remember, because you read the Case for Reparations by Ta-Nehisi Coates, right?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so at the beginning of the article or the essay, when under the title "The Case for Reparations," and this is, and let's break it down like this: 250 years of slavery, 90 years of Jim Crow, 60 years of separate but equal, 35 years of racist housing policy. Until we reckon with our compounding moral debts, America will never be whole.
Right. And what's fascinating is that some of this goes back to arguments that were made by Booker T. Washington at the what was it called, the Southern
what was that?
I want to say Emporium, but it wasn't Emporium, but it was in Atlanta in the late 1800s.
I know what you're talking about. It was it was like dueling things, because you have Booker T. Washington on one, as it was exposition or something. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and he was excoriated by the black community because of some of his ideas.
Yes.
But at the Southern Exposition, I think it was, where he said, he said, Black America will either be a millstone about your neck, or we will be a vibrant part of carrying this country into the future. But it's up to y'all, not us. And
right.
the choice that America made was obvious. Mm-hmm. Oh, by the way, Lady B has started a thing. Oh, and I need to send thanks out to Anatole. We're down to only $32 to go to meet John's challenge, which is huge, and we got about 29 minutes to meet it in. Now, the Lady B has started something. Earther follows up and says, also remember genetics. 1, we all come from Africa, except Bob. 2, there was a bottleneck, and there were only 1,000 to 2,000 people at some point. So there's not much of a difference between people when you get right down to it. Bob, on the other hand, 50% Scandinavian, 25% Western Scandinavian, 37% Scots-Irish, 28% lily white, 10% afraid of sunlight, 3% bad at dancing, 2% unidentified whiteness, 1% Afro-Korean. If you can't give a cowbell out for something like that,
And it was the Cotton States and International Exposition in Atlanta.
Cotton States, yes.
September 18th, 1895.
And there's an echo of what Booker T. Washington was saying in what Ta-Nehisi Coates says about never healing.
Like you said, and when you talk about reparations, and by virtue of the fact, the closest anybody ever got to reparations was, which could have been affirmative action. And that article that I sent you by Michael Harriot, about just the whole cheating scandal and how why we need affirmative action. I was listening to this brother the other day that I, never heard of. And he's like, look, we all knew white folks have gotten into schools and stuff like that by virtue of a back door. Endowments, donating buildings, libraries, whatever. But now they got the side door of, the straight out and out bribing and cheating. And it's like, dude, seriously? I mean, the world, there's so many things, the privilege that people have just by virtue of being white, and then compounded with, the fact that there is the wealth base of like people like Lori Loughlin and Felicity Huffman, who they're like, okay, we don't have big time money like the Trumps and the Koch brothers and all, the Kennedys and all that. So we can't out and out donate a building. So now or do an endowment or what have you. So now we're just going to have to just figure out another way to get our mediocre ass kids into school. Oh, on that note, USC, and I don't know if you heard this, but they're doing a serious investigation now, and they're going to probably expel the kids.
Good. Good. There should be a house cleaning, especially if the kids can be shown to have participated in any way.
Exactly.
Oh, by the way, this is great. This is great. Andy, now Andy the Angry Jew has jumped in. 10% mayonnaise. You guys are ruthless. And I guess it's that 1% Afro-Korean that explains the freckles, or maybe they're liver spots given my age. Who is she mad at?
She's mad at me because I'm too close to Jan, and I'm trying to fix her.
Take the collar. You're not paying attention.
Trying to fix her collar. She's going to a banquet tonight that she doesn't want to go to.
Ah, okay. And now Ace is another country heard from. I'm guessing your acorn barbecuing skills can be chalked up to your Afro-Korean genealogy. Them Koreans make a mean barbecue, and we already know about the barbecue skills of African Americans. So let's just pile on the stereotypes, people. Professional radio.
At its finest.
No. Well,
it's a professional radio at its finest, but I'm going to let you go because I know there's other people who want to talk. But as usual, enjoy the conversation. So here's the thing. Since Jan is going out, we're probably going to get to go eat food that we can't normally eat.
Well, we like it you're away, so we can eat what we want to eat.
And she just counted it with her. We like it when you're gone, so we can eat stuff that we like to eat. So
domestic bliss. Thank God. Thank God for marriage equality.
Exactly. It's like, that conversation brought to you by, the right for gay people to marry. Yay.
Well, you may not realize it, but one of the biggest groups that was rooting for marriage equality was
lawyers.
The lawyers. Because that means that just expanded the market for the divorce work.
But see, I want divorce court, just the gay divorce court.
So you want you want like gay divorce court judges and.
Yeah, well, not the judges don't have to be. Well, it would be fun if the judge was like Billy Porter.
Yeah.
Or RuPaul,
And see, I am not. You are not going to entice me into doing any kind of an impression or, yeah.
No, please don't.
No.
But just can you? But the fun, the awesomeness that would be. Could you imagine Billy Porter as a divorce judge?
Oh. It would be. Yes, it would be for the ages.
It would be for the ages. It would be, Queen, please. Oh my God. Oh my God.
I cannot believe that you're arguing over those window treatments in the property settlement. My God, the losers should get them. See, you made me do it anyway.
I'm going to go because we got a hair emergency. So anywho.
Oh, no, not a hair emergency. Dear God.
Yeah, it's a hair emergency.
Yeah.
So anyway, on that note, it was awesome, and I can't wait to hear who comes on next.
All right, Tracy, you take care. Y'all enjoy Everybody enjoy what everybody's going to eat.
We shall.
All right, later. Bye now.
Bye.
And with an update to my genetic profile, Lady B comes back. Okay, Bob, let's see. A, white. B, burned by the refrigerator light, white. C, shimmering like the sunlight touching the face of a laughing child. D, translucent like the gossamer wings of angel butterflies surrounding Jesus' robes. God almighty. I think that's damning by overkill or something. That's not fainting with damn praise, but and then we also cannot forget this from James in Illinois. When you were born, they couldn't see you till you opened your mouth. You're a cruel bunch, is what y'all are. A cruel, cold bunch. 10% mayonnaise. I thought we were friends. Yeah, Lee in New York says, subject line, RuPaul, don't even try RuPaul on radio. It has to have visuals. See, yeah, right. That's because I realize that. If this was video, no. And if it was video, I would twice as much not do it because no. Just because no. Oh, but Lee writes in, and Lee is often responsible for our obligatory Star Trek references of late. I found something on Netflix last night. Netflix has Star Trek, the original series, the whole thing right now. But they've got something I had never seen, and Agnes had never seen it before, and we reveled in it. Everybody knows the only two-part Star Trek, the original series episode, The Menagerie. The one with Captain Christopher Pike in it. Well, and everybody generally knows that the flashbacks to Captain Christopher Pike and Vina on Telos 4 was from the pilot. But I had never before seen the pilot itself. Not the little chopped-in flashbacks in the Menagerie, but the actual pilot episode. It's there. It's on Netflix. It's called The Cage. And, you click on Star Trek, the original series, and it's the first one of the first season. Holy mackerel. Agnes and I, we're fans. I love the original. There's not many of them I don't care for. I wasn't a big DS9 fan, but it had its merits. Star Trek Voyager, And unlike most people, I enjoyed the hell out of Star Trek Enterprise. And I finally broke down and started, because I was going to wait till the whole damn season was over. But we finally broke down and started watching Star Trek Discovery. I had planned to just do it on a binge basis. But to sit down at The Cage is a wonderful exercise in, I really understand why the network sent this back for retooling. I didn't even realize that the pilot was made in 1964. 55 years ago. And it is awful. It's for a Star Trek fan, it's delightfully awful. But it's awful. They really hadn't quite gotten those glue-on eyebrows down yet with Leonard Nimoy. And even the time interval between 1964 and 1966 makes the visuals, like the telescreen and whatnot, apparently it makes all the difference in the world. The uniforms are horrible. Jeffrey Hunter, well, he's no William Shatner. Susan Oliver as the human woman on the planet. But the fact that on a starship that can travel 7 times the speed of light, and the reference to we've broken the time barrier, and the actual use of the phrase time warp, which now immediately makes when you hear the phrase in the Cage pilot, everybody has to stand up and start doing the time warp. But best of all was the fact that in the far-flung future, starships that can exceed the speed of light by a factor of 7 still provision and go into space, not just with printers, but I immediately recognized where the props department had gotten their printouts come out on paper, and it's the same yellow paper that in 1979 I was loading into a UPI teletype at a radio station. It's a sort of a yellow foolscap. I think foolscap is the word, isn't it? It's sort of soft and a little bit fragile, and the ink would fade. And they needed to know something about someone, and that so somebody, and there's no Sulu, there is no Chekhov, there's no Scott, there's no McCoy, obviously no Kirk. There are hints at a love interest between the captain and a little ginger yeoman who keeps getting withering glances from Majel Barrett, who is, I guess, the second in command on the ship. We watched in awestruck delight. It was amazing. The doctor, Arthur points out, the doctor was different, too. He was a white-haired guy who dispensed brusque fatherly advice to Captain Pike, and Captain Pike was apparently on the verge of a nervous breakdown after the fight on Rigel 7 that apparently involved Lurch's cousin in a fur biker vest with a spittoon on his head and some of the worst dental work since early English comedy. If you've got Netflix, it's worth that little chunk of your life just to see kind of the newborn at the moment that it emerged from the mind of Gene Roddenberry. And when you read that, the network sent it back and said it was too thinky, for once, by the time they canceled it after the 3rd season, you're like, those network bastards. But in 1964, the guys at the network were absolutely right. Facts about the Cage coming from Lee in New York. The network thought that it was too cerebral. That's why I said thinky. They did not want the alien on the bridge. They didn't want a female second in command. Roddenberry wanted the crew 50% male, 50% female. They thought that had implications. But they saw enough to consider a second pilot. That had not been done before. Roddenberry knew he could not keep both Spock and number 1. Roddenberry fought to keep Spock and married Majel Barrett. They did not recognize her later as Nurse Chapel. Exactly. And, of course, she goes on to play Loxana Troy, the mother of Deanna Troy, on Next Generation. sometimes we have to just sometimes we have to lighten the crazy with a little bit of lightheartedness. And again, we are down to $32 to finish John's extremely generous challenge and meet it so that we can actually knock out $310 of the $640 hole. I don't know. Randy in PA says the teletype machine used in newsrooms in the 1960s and much later may have been a model KSR-35. This thing was about the size of half an iron lung, and it made a racket like a machine gun, and it had a physical bell like a typewriter. You know, when you get to the margin, tick 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 ding. It had its own dinger and would send alarm bells depending on how serious the story that was coming across was. Like I said earlier, I'm not getting on any bandwagons, but I'm inclined to point out when Democratic candidates get things right. So kudos to Elizabeth Warren, speaking yesterday at a town hall in Mississippi. We have to remember that Mississippi disenfranchises more people with felony convictions than any other state in the Union. There are 22 different violations that can get you banned for life from being able to vote. And an organization called the Sentencing Project said that by 2016, every bit of 10% of otherwise eligible people in Mississippi had been disenfranchised. And so Elizabeth Warren addressed this when she went to Mississippi, because someone at the town hall asked her how she would expand voting rights to the formerly incarcerated.
Also happens to be the sister and former campaign manager of Jackson's current mayor, Chokwe Antar Lumumba. Her late father, Chokwe Lumumba, was also once the mayor of this city as well. Rukia.
All right. Good to see you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Welcome to Jackson, Mississippi. Yeah. So voter disenfranchisement is real. In Mississippi, there are 23 felonies that once convicted ban a person from voting for the rest of their lives, literally limiting their citizenship and right to democracy. Moreover, residents' access to voting is limited by archaic voter registration processes and limited voting formats. How will you expand voting rights to the formerly incarcerated, ensure online voter registration, and non-excuse early voting?
All right. Question, but can I go you one bigger? Yeah. And that is, I believe we need a constitutional amendment that protects the right to vote for every American citizen and to make sure that vote gets counted. We need to put some federal muscle behind that, and we need to repeal every one of the voter suppression laws that is out there right now.
You can almost, before she goes on, you can almost hear the people from Mississippi all over the former Confederacy go, but what about states' rights?
And I'll tell you one more. We need to make sure that every vote counts. And I want to push that right here in Mississippi, because I think this is an important point. You know, come a general election, presidential candidates don't come to places like Mississippi. Yeah. They also don't come to places like California and Massachusetts, right? Because we're not the battleground states. Well, my view is that every vote matters. And the way we can make that happen is that we can have national voting, and that means get rid of the Electoral College and every vote.
Right there. That. Get rid of the Electoral College. Maybe other candidates have said it. I haven't heard it said. But the Electoral College is an anachronism from a time in this country, you know, that time that, what's her name, Kate Pavlich says that we don't get credit for. It's an anachronism from a time, it was born of a wrongness. And it's got to go. So good on Elizabeth Warren. Thank you, Earther. I guess we're going to take this right down to the wire. Thank you, Earther. We now have $22 to go to finish with John's challenge. $22 to go. Thank you, Earther, for jumping in. Thank you, everybody, for taking this as far down as you've gone. Hopefully we can knock it out in 5 minutes. And let's go over and check in with Scott. Hey, Scott.
Hello, Bob. Two quick things, because I know time is tight. The great Booker T song. Booker T. Jones, I believe the artist's name was. Instrumental. It was a hit, actually. Two things. One, in relation to something you and Tracy were talking about. Well, let me do the fun thing, then I'll wrap up with the serious thing. The fun thing, and this recommendation is coming from someone who only has seen Star Trek, the original series, and most, if not all, of the Star Trek films that featured the original cast. On Amazon Prime, there's a documentary from about 3 or 4 years ago, William Shatner's Chaos on the Bridge. Shatner takes viewers inside the creation of Star Trek The Next Generation, the bold attempt in 1986 to recreate the success of the original television series, in which, of course, Shatner played Captain James Tiberius Kirk of Iowa. See, now this gives me hope for Iowa, Bob. Isn't Iowa the state that Cantaloupe's king represents a district in?
I believe it's the Iowa 5th, yes.
All right. If James Tiberius Kirk, years and years from now, originated in Iowa, he's a rather enlightened human being, I would think. So that would give me hope that, if only in science fiction, there is an evolution of thought and consciousness and understanding waiting in the wings for the people of Iowa. So that's something to hang your hat on, if only for purposes of dreams and aspirations. But the thing that you and Tracy were talking about, and you just kind of touched on it in terms of reparations and the karmic nature of how the people who, quote, discovered the North American continent treated the then current inhabitants of some stature and some length. Okay, the decimation of the Native American population, and the ones that they didn't kill, they penned up, for all intents and purposes, on what they called reservations. Okay, so there's that, you know.
And as we both learned from that documentary Rumble, they shipped a whole bunch of Native American men over the seas. They transported them.
Yes. And that film, by the way, is called Rumble, and it's on either Netflix or Amazon. And
is it? Because I saw it on PBS.
Okay, yes, it's now on, I believe, Amazon Prime, but it might be Netflix. But here's the other deal. With black people who were shipped over here en masse without much regard of their survival rate. I mean, they figured into the equation on the shipping manifest well, a certain number of them's going to die, you know, for purposes of enslavement in this country. That I don't know if you believe in the notion of karma, if that's the correct word, but it's that what goes around comes around dynamic throughout the thread of life and generations. America's karma, partially because of the treatment of black people in this country historically and native people in this country historically, unless we take steps to look that history right in the face and some way rectify it and make amends for it and atone for that behavior, our national karma will continue to be fucked up. Can I be very wrong on that?
No, you're not. That's exactly the tenor of the quote that Tracy had from Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Yeah, and it is so self-evident to quote a phrase from our founders. It's so self-evident that you would think it would have been done by now, just as by now you would have thought that the Electoral College would have gone the way of the dodo. So if these things, these traditions, sick traditions, have not gone away, then it must be benefiting somebody. So
Ding.
then you've got to look at the somebodies who are deriving benefit from not coming to terms.
Well,
with slavery.
there's that ancient Latin phrase, cui bono.
Yeah, who benefits?
To whom the good, or for whom the good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
by the way, you've got a little bit of a criticism here, courtesy of Lee in New York.
It wouldn't be Tuesday. Well, the criticism when I call it
state generalization. Scott should not judge a state by a person and vice versa, like Kirk. Okay. Do I have to say any more than Bob Kincaid? Clearly not representing the average West Virginian.
Or Alabamian.
No, I represent the below average West Virginian. Damn it! Remember, this is adequate radio, courtesy of our buddy Dan Fisher, who by the way this week is celebrating the 6-month anniversary of his new used heart.
Good for him. May it proudly wave. Or no, hearts don't wave. May it proudly beat.
Yes, indeed, for a very long time.
Decades to come.
So I've got a funny for you, just to close things out.
Okay.
I had no idea. Well, I guess I kind of did, but didn't. It's not something you sit around thinking about.
Yeah.
There is apparently a thing that is generated by the White House.
A thing?
A document.
Okay.
It is called the Economic Report of the President.
Would this be considered like a House organ?
No. It's a doc
in writing. I mean.
Well, I mean, any administration is going to use anything like that for self-serving purposes.
Right. Okay. Well, what is this thing? He said.
Well, it's a report on economics of the president. That's kind of like asking Barney Fife what was the Emancipation Proclamation. It's a proclamation, Ange, of emancipation. So, and by the way, we went right down to the wire. Ralph's knocked us down to $10, and Lady B knocked us down to 0. So thank you to Ralph's and Lady B. We have met John's challenge. That's tremendous. And so it's a lot less horrifying when I come back on Thursday. But thank you, sincerely, thank you. The Economic Report of the President, it contains a section on presidential interns.
Mm-hmm.
And the section on presidential interns is basically a list of names. But a woman by the name of Martha Gimbel, who was once a Labor Department member and a member of the Council of Economic Advisors, apparently she does things like sitting around reading the Economic Report of the President. Because, well, there are people out there who do that kind of thing. And this is too good not to share.
All right.
The report on interns, and do you remember the picture of the White House interns? And they all check all of those boxes that Lady B was talking about in regard to me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, lo and behold, the interns list has changed.
Yeah, and I would describe that photograph contains people who are freshly scrubbed and blindingly white.
I was going to say tanned by the moon.
Yes.
Okay, this is a long list of names, but work with me.
All right.
This is the interns section of the economic report of the president. Student interns provide invaluable help with research projects, day-to-day operations, and fact-checking. Interns during the previous year were Brittany Amano, Jackson Bailey, Rana Bonsall, Christian Brown, Lydia Byram, John Cleese, Alexis Soroti, Jesse Dennis, Mackenzie Duckhut, Adam Donahoe, Troy Dury, Michael Everett, Isabel Holland, Wesley Wong, J.T. Hutt, Catherine Janeway, Mustafa Kamal, Aisha Karnick, David Lash, John Leo, Eugene Liu, Casey Manlove, Aunt May, Kevin Wynn, Catherine Olson, Sarah Park, Peter Parker, Pragya, Suman's going to write me a nasty email. Pragya Parthar. I had this before the program started. Parthasarathi, Arjun Ramani, Kriyana Reddy, Steve Rogers, Jake Rosen, Joshua Siegel, John Snow, Nirali Trivedi, Bruce Wayne, Amanda Wilcox, and Jason Ziemba.
Not present for roll call were Chuck Roast and Chester Drawers. I'm thinking.
But absolutely.
And did you say they were responsible for fact checking?
These are the student interns, and the ones that really jump out. Yes,
what are they doing with the money, Bob? It's not being used for fact checking.
Well, what are they doing with the money? Somebody got paid to make up this list out of whole cloth. John Cleese, really?
Yeah.
Did you catch J.T. Hutt?
J.T. Hutt. No, I should know that.
Jabba the Hutt.
Oh, no. No, Bob.
Yes, Scott.
That's like the adult film actress in the film It Happened in Hollywood, Felicity Split.
I'm surprised Claude Orably wasn't in there.
Yeah.
Catherine Janeway? After we just had a Star Trek discussion?
Yeah.
Aunt May? Spider-Man's beloved aunt?
And Peter Parker?
Spider-Man?
Yes.
Steve Rogers? Captain Marvel? Or Captain America, rather? Jon Snow? Game of Thrones? And, of course, Bruce Wayne. Batman.
And that's just a little scam, Bob. I mean, in the grand scheme of things and scams, that's not going to be headline news, okay? So if you figure that they are so detail-oriented that they're doing that scam, that level of scam, you've got to really, really wonder. No, you don't have to wonder. Just read the papers. You know, look at TV once in a while, something other than...
And you know what? If it wasn't... And I freely admit my bias, Scott. If it was not this administration, I'd be chuckling and saying something like, why those wacky people at the Council of Economic Advisors, they gave us some Easter eggs to hunt for, and isn't that just adorable?
Or something early for April Fools, But no, with this crew.
Anybody surprised that Jabba the Hutt works for this administration?
A character roughly inspired by Roger Ailes, I might add. And put pictures of Jabba the Hutt.
I wonder if anybody has tweeted that list to John Cleese yet.
Well, someone ought to.
I'll have to check on Twitter
when knows John Cleese.
Well, no, I mean anybody can tweet at him. Other people are bound to have done it by now because he's gonna have once he finds out, he's going to have a field day.
Yeah, Jesus.
From the ministry of silly Trumps.
I'm telling you, you've got to keep. These people are like little children, 2- and 3-year-olds, and this is not to insult your average 2- and 3-year-old. These are like errant little children. When it's quiet, you know that they're up to something, and it's probably something no good. They've shaved the cat, or super glued the dog to the ceiling. Any number of things.
I'm just waiting to find out that somebody saran wrapped Julius Geezer's toilet seat.
Oh, well, he's such a germaphobe, he'll probably go absolutely batty. We've got to watch him. We've got to watch him. I'm telling you, it's sad that we have to, because you see a lot of stuff that you cannot unsee. You hear a lot of stuff that you cannot unhear. But it's all part of the package. I mean, people think that voting every 2 or 4 years is all there is to it. There's way more to it. You've got to ride herd on the people who are riding herd, supposedly. You've got to engage and stay engaged and be engaged and invite your friends to participate in a meaningful way. That's what the founders had in mind, ultimately. Yeah, granted, it was originally slanted toward the landowners and the white males, okay? But in their heart of hearts, I think they thought that we would take that template, that pattern, like a dress pattern, and after some trial and error, we would begin to get it right more often than we got it wrong. Nothing is all said and done in America. The whole nature of this microcosm of democracy is we keep doing it until we get it right, and it's a living process. I mean, if the Constitution is a living document that is not reimagined, but looked at and acted upon in each new generation, then the generations, the people that comprise the generations, are a living entity, and we got to start acting like it. What is it? I've got to stop calling, because I start preaching, and I don't mean to preach, because most of the people hearing me, they get it.
No, you're not preaching, you're testifying. There's a difference. Trust me, I'm a recovering Southern Baptist. I know these things.
Yeah, well, you're right. Maybe it is testifying, because we all of us are aware to some degree what the stakes are, and it's like the biggest poker game on earth, and the chips are piled high in the center of the table, and somebody is going to win them chips, and it better be us in 2020. Because if it ain't us, what do I say a lot of the time, Bob? We're all screwed.
We're all
Bob.
screwed.
So there you go. I want that list. Send me a link to find that list, because I want to post about that on my little Facebook.
Well, do you tweet? I mean, do you do Twitter?
No, I don't do Twitter, but I do Facebook.
Well, you can. It's on Twitter, so.
Okay. What is the woman's name that did did the list?
She's on Twitter because she's got a blue check mark.
Okay.
Let me see here. Martha Gimbel, Gimbel.
Gimbel, yeah. All right, I'll look her up.
I mean, if you just do a search of Martha Gimbel Twitter, I mean, tweets show up in search engine results.
Yeah, I know. Okay, I'll do that, and I'll make a screenshot of it and write a few salient words about it.
You know, I'm guessing plucky young intern J.T. Hutt probably has a stint at the Club for Growth on his resume too.
Well, I'm not sure that you would call that growth. That's uncontrolled spreading. It's like lava coming down a Hawaiian hill. And it's getting closer, Bob.
It's getting closer, Scott.
Run!
Run, God damn it. Later, Scott. You have a good evening.
All right, you too, man. See ya.
Later. And thanks, everybody. Thanks so very much for your participation this evening. And thanks to everybody who managed to knock out, golly Moses, $350, thanks to John's challenge. With your participation, we knocked out $350 of a $660 deficit, and that's tremendous. So thank you very kindly indeed. And thanks to all of you who share your precious finite time engaging in the program. Thanks to our all-volunteer staff. Thanks to Sparky for hanging in for a little while during the program. Thanks to Steve from Georgia Stan. Thank you to our news ninjas. Thank you to Brother Deacon Asa, headon.live. Thanks to John Fox in Australia. Thank you, Ben Birch, whiterosesociety.org. Thanks to the hardest working, bravest people I know, the men and women of Coal River Mountain Watch, crmw.net. 20 years in the forefront of the struggle for human rights and environmental justice in Appalachia. And always, 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 Gina, it's all for you. Later, y'all. Back Thursday. Cross your fingers for Agnes at the doctor tomorrow. See ya.